Welcome to this new episode of The Context. My name is David Orban, and I want to talk to you today about human networks. We have, of course, formed networks in our societies since we existed. We are social animals. At the beginning, these networks were our villages, our dwellings, and they were comprised of a few dozen, maybe a few hundred individuals. And we were very unlikely to actually go outside of this circle, and it was only narratives of fairy tales and our myths that would permeate back and forth with the rhythms of a slower life that would change what we would be thinking, how we would be thinking about the world. It was a deep time linking cultures, probably across continents, across the entire planet, but through generations. Some of these myths, some of these narratives, some of these networks survive to this day. When you read the Odyssey or the Iliad, you are participating in the written communications ability to actually extend the network from a completely location-constrained interaction to one that is able to link people who are not at the same place together. And of course, written communication made it possible to record one's memories, transmit one's thoughts, but it also enabled us to reply. We started to have these networks that were intertwined with correspondence. One of my favorite ones is the one between Leibniz and Newton. As a matter of fact, between Leibniz and Clarke, a strong supporter of Newton, to talk about their respective discoveries in mathematics and as they apply to physics, but what then became a broader conversation around what is the meaning of life and the respective philosophies and theologies that were shaping their understanding of the world. The topology of these networks as they developed in the past were, of course, in my view, an expression not only of the nature of human social interaction, but very strongly also of the technologies that were available. The most important example, I would say, is how we organized our cities, the kingdoms, the city-states of the ancient world. And within the city-states, the caste system or the caste-like systems, and within those systems, the communication between the individuals and the command and control mechanisms that were available at the time. Most of these topologies were extremely hierarchical. The military organizations of how the rankings would enable orders to be formulated, promulgated, communicated, implemented, and who would outrank whom. The technology, of course, changes, and the one-to-many communication channels that even up to the 20th century characterized communication, such as books, which I already mentioned, but also radio, television, cinema, where everybody participating in receiving the message that these very hierarchical top-down networks were able to promote could have almost no opportunity to speak back. Well, these communication technologies in the 21st century have been substituted by many communication platforms. And our networks, our interactions, as a consequence, profoundly changed with them. Once again, I would say that an important and interesting example of this change is how even the most hierarchical, the most regimented network, the military organizations, are now recognizing how a different kind of more peer-to-peer network topology can be desirable in mission-driven tasks where the orders are not top-down anymore, but there are multiple input sources and a more, not necessarily egalitarian, but a multifaceted consideration for the decision-making process that gets into their thinking and their actions as well. So these many-to-many communication platforms are important because they represent a multiplying force to what used to be the village, where everybody would know everybody else and gossip would drive the accumulation and distribution of knowledge in waves about the various types of behavior that were admissible or inadmissible, ambitions that would be thwarted or supported, extreme measures of ostracism or expulsion that were necessary to, on one hand, allow individuals to escape from the limits of their imposed social structure, but on the other hand, to preserve the identity of the social structure as well. Some of these new platforms, like email, are now 50 years old. And email is still one of the more sophisticated means of asynchronous communication. Synchronous or asynchronous means that the various parties taking part in the communication need to be simultaneously together, synchronous communication, or the various parties can afford to absorb the message and respond to the message at their own pace. And the communication platform supports this kind of alternative system of interacting. Asynchronous communication. So email is asynchronous, and the modern email clients allow threading, for example, where the subject line of the email will group the various replies together. And anybody listening this, check if your email client allows threaded communications, and I strongly recommend that you turn on the threads. And then when you start to like that kind of grouping, which may compactify the list of various emails, not necessarily confusing you with the list that becomes too long and something that you didn't reply to goes out of your main screen and you forget about it. That is when you realize that you should change the subject line of an email consciously, knowing when it is time to do that, knowing when you should keep the original subject. And it is typically because the topic stays the same or the topic actually changed and it deserves a new threaded conversation on email. There are many other reasons why email is still very robust and very rich in features that other more recent platforms haven't had the time of accruing yet. The most famous synchronous communication system, of course, is telephone, even though originally it only used to be one-to-one. And then phone conferencing systems emerged, and they were the bane of office management, where a lot of times, and still it is the case, a conference call is a lost opportunity because of the way that it is often organized or misorganized. Sometimes it is too long. Oftentimes the participants don't establish what the actions are at the end of the call. It is really, in a large percentage, not very useful at all. Internet Relay Chat, IRC, is another example of a fairly ancient electronic chat system that a lot of people still use. Not the hundreds of millions of people that use WeChat or WhatsApp, but still millions of people, maybe tens of millions of people. WhatsApp in particular is very popular in the West. WeChat is extraordinarily popular in China. And while WeChat became a platform in its own, where additional modules allow hiring a taxi cab or booking a restaurant, making a payment, and many, many other things, WhatsApp remained mostly a chat platform, and rather primitive as that. One of the most important features of text that voice is very slowly starting to inherit due to AI voice and speech recognition systems is that text is searchable. And that is why, for me, email is still so useful, because it allows me to search in a sophisticated manner and find messages that are relevant to what I want to do. And chat systems, whether we are talking about Skype, Telegram, Signal, WhatsApp, or others, haven't achieved those levels of sophistication in their features, either searching or archiving, organizing, threading, etc., etc. Nonetheless, of course, these systems are sophisticated enough to develop kinds of behavior that others can judge as appropriate or inappropriate for the platform. In the physical world, these kinds of interactions are called the etiquette of well-behaved conversation, or visiting somebody, or having dinner and using the right kind of cutlery with the right kind of food, and other sources of embarrassment, more or less purposefully designed in order to artificially distinguish and sort people in those who are well versed in these arcane practices, and those who are newcomers or who just snuck in but don't necessarily belong. The corresponding rules of behavior in the electronic systems that weave the human networks is netiquette. And of course, netiquette often re-implements, reinvents these rules. Why not? For similar purposes of labeling, sorting, classifying, admitting, banning individuals in participating at certain degrees in these networks. And the electronic platforms that gave rise to what today we call social networks, from Friendster to Facebook, and in the middle with so many others, express powerful lessons about how important topology, architecture, interaction, netiquette, and features actually are. We have learned last year one of these powerful lessons when, for the umpteenth time, Google threw in the towel after Google Wave, Google Buzz, Google, I don't remember even how many other attempts at building the social network native to Google. They threw in the towel on Google Plus, at the time their most ambitious attempt of building a social network, at which they completely failed. More recently, they threw in the towel on another social feature that they tried to build into YouTube. I don't know if you even knew, but on top of the commenting system that is sitting beneath every YouTube video that allows the viewers to express their opinions, often very negative, sometimes positive, and the creators to respond, but also viewers having conversations. YouTube introduced a feature that they were supposed to be extending for a community type of section. And if you didn't know, don't bother learning, because they already closed it. Isn't it fascinating that money is not enough? Google could have all the amounts of money they want to dedicate to this task. Millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars, maybe even tens of billions of dollars. Wouldn't it be worth it if they could, quotation marks, beat Facebook? But money is not enough. This is a huge lesson for startups that are jealous of their ideas. Isn't everything that Facebook does available for others to copy or be inspired by, as Google could have been inspired and was for sure in designing Google+? The barrier is not if the idea is known or secret, rather, and others cannot copy it. The barrier is not having money, because we've seen that having money is not enough. The ability to build something that people want and really use day in, day out, the ability to create features that, in this case, create new important social networks, is what makes a big difference. Today, together with Facebook, another important social network for human networks on the professional segment is LinkedIn. And LinkedIn has been acquired by Microsoft for $14 billion a few years ago, and some, including me, expected that the acquisition would signal the excessive integration of LinkedIn into the Microsoft ecosystem, such as requiring the use of the Microsoft account for signing in or signing up for LinkedIn, or other mistakes, but it wasn't the case. And LinkedIn is evolving, adding new features like the ability today of signaling interest in a post, or exclamation, or the traditional thumbs up liking, inspired by Facebook's similar nuanced expression of feedback in a post. Live streaming of video and the ever more sophisticated creation of content, both in groups as well as on the individual profiles. On LinkedIn, there are a lot of people who are, maybe as a consequence of these new features that are being added, confused what they should be doing with the platform. How active should they be in those kinds of traditional social media sharing activities that we got accustomed to on Facebook? Should you share cat videos on LinkedIn? Should you stream your life of what you are eating, or your influencer type photos on LinkedIn, what more traditionally belong to Telegram? The experiments, of course, are endearing, because sometimes it is very easy to see that they are blunders, and no, you should not share cat videos on LinkedIn. But it is positive to have experiments nonetheless. One of the things that I have been watching and I want to experiment with myself is not only live video, which I am definitely going to do probably on Twitch, but the re-streaming of video across multiple platforms, where then you can gauge which platform is more amenable to these live activities, and which ones you should invest more. It is also fascinating to look at what are the limits of the platforms. The most striking limit, for example, on Facebook, is that you cannot add more than 5,000 friends, connections. And I used to think that this was a mistake, maybe, that Facebook should allow a larger number. As a matter of fact, on LinkedIn, the limit is 30,000. Why shouldn't Facebook go as far? The traditional measure of connection limits, the Dunbar number, which is set at 150, is our supposed ability to have strong connections to other people. And our origins in tightly knit communities biologically evolved this limit to be that low, relatively speaking. But there is also a concept of really making the connection valuable. It doesn't matter what tools support the connection. It could increase the Dunbar number, let's say from 150 in a physical world of a village to 5,000 on Facebook, and to 30,000 on LinkedIn, and maybe to an even larger number with other support tools on other platforms. But still, that network is yours. And it is not just a mathematical and a topological concept. The value of that network is in your investment, your curation, your interaction, the ability to introduce somebody to somebody else when you asked, and how today's practices of double opt-in in these introductions allow the other party to say, thank you, I don't want to meet your friend today on email or in person. The favor that he's asking is a burden to me, and please do not complete the introduction. This is rather important. Double opt-in is a precious tool for smoothing otherwise embarrassing situations. Well, I don't like, as a consequence, those LinkedIn users that have lion written after their name. This started as a kind of a protest when LinkedIn started restricting the way that you could use your network. And LION stands for LinkedIn Open Network or Networker. people who will accept every connection. And for me, that means that you become like a stamp collector. You are not applying any judgment to who you should or shouldn't accept. And the value of the network is severely degraded as a consequence. Now, obviously, the value of the human networks is not only in professional or social support or in our emotional ability to share what we do. It is also in our ability to follow through, to act. Woody Allen used to say 80% of life is showing up. So following through in a human network, in a social network, is really important. Actually, 80% or more, whatever the number, is going to be accomplished just by delivering what you can deliver and what you said you will deliver in a social interaction. Already, sophisticated tools are supporting our human networks. In many, LinkedIn again, when you start a conversation, you are given suggestions on how to open it, how to continue it, and these pieces of AI support in the enriching of human networks are going to get ever more sophisticated. We will talk about synthetic persons and AI-based personas. These will be more and more important. These are going to be part of our future human networks. This will be for another episode of The Context. I want to thank you for having watched this episode, and I want to invite you to become a supporter on Patreon if you liked it. This allows me, for as little as $5 a month on your part, or the amount that you choose, less or more, to keep producing these videos together with my team, who help me designing, researching, editing, publishing, and promoting on the various human social networks the videos of the series of The Context. Thank you very much.